What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Classic Reddit, where real humans read Reddit content. Today's Ask Reddit post is, Sailors of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing you've ever seen while you were out at sea? Oh, an epic post by Hypersaze. Not me, but my dad was a Coastie, and he's got some great stories. They've got a coal to retrieve a body, which was fairly common due to the dangerous sea and their proximity to a large bridge that people would use to kill themselves. They pulled the bloated, discolored, and decomposing body on board. There was a new seaman who had never seen a dead body, but he was hanging tough and generally handled it well. He was even the one to retrieve the body. He was, until the skin started to move, then writhe, with indistinct shapes moving under the skin. He managed to hold it together until the crabs started coming out of the dead guy's mouth and through the soft spots on his flesh. Meanwhile, everyone else had ditched new guys since they knew what was coming. They waited until they heard vomiting and came back to relieve him. Kinda up, I guess, but you develop a bit of gallows humor in that line of work. Besides, it really wouldn't be any less horrifying with other people around. That's not even the worst one. My dad's also got lots of hilarious stories, and he is a bonafide hero to boot. That's not even the worst one. We're waiting. I don't know, man. That's pretty bad. I thought it was gonna be some kind of worms, but crabs is somehow worse. I agree. I was imagining maggots, but for me, actually, crabs is somehow better than maggots. At least they're bigger. A nice day, doing some inshore sailing, when I saw a hand sticking out of the water in the distance. Just a hand. I headed towards it, and the closer I got, the more uneasy I became. It looked like someone was completely submerged with just part of their hand out of the water waving for help. For 40 yards away, the hand looked swollen and gray. I got this sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, thinking I was about to find a bladed, pale, drowning victim. It turned out to be just a work glove, floating in an odd way. But for about 2 minutes, I was gonna freak out. Not seen, but heard. Whales singing at night are creepy as hell. I was about 30 to 40 miles out, looking at the depth reader. It was getting to some high numbers. Then it just stopped reading it. I knew it was just too deep for it, but it really freaked me out. Oh. Nah, you get used to them. But holy, when you're at anchor enjoying a nice beer and a humpback surfaces next to you and exhales, you'll jump out of your skin. Bonus points if the whale breath mist gets you. Oh, that must be a pretty amazing experience. Caught a submarine on radar when it surfaced, then heard the pings all night as it followed us. Oh, that's gotta be freaky. Yeah, I didn't even think about war sea stories, jeez. Ex-submariner here. There's usually no reason for a submarine to constantly ping you. It gives away their location. Now, if there was some hazard, that's another story. Most likely, they were either training or just with you. Navy guys are bored all the time. We tie up close to a sonar testing ground. I hate the sound of active bouncing off my hull. Do you remember the name or number of the boat? I'm a Coast Guard crew member in that area. Wow, until you mentioned Coast Guard, I thought you legit had been boarded by pirates. It's cool that people with guns can just board you and scream at you with impunity. Brother is a sailor. He had some story about small high-speed boats that would rush towards his container ship and then turn around after getting a little too close, while somewhere around the Middle East. My dad was also a sailor and had some story about sleeping on the dock, waking up, and seeing a water spout in the distance. Sounds like smugglers. I used to man a 50 cal during straight transits. The smugglers use US ships as radar cover when they make runs from Yemen to Iran with contraband. The Iranian Navy would run them down and catch them, but But they know if they bust ass across our wake, the Iranians won't go with them. I've seen them get so close I could tell you what brand of cigarettes they smoked. Jeez. I've seen them before, but not in heavy fog. I would have noped back inside if there was. Oh, that's hardcore. Not a sailor, but my father and grandfather told me a creepy story that happened to them at sea. They were out on a yacht trip when my step-grandmother decided to go for a swim at dusk and got herself surrounded by a giant jellyfish. They said the head of the jellyfish was about 2 meters in diameter, and they couldn't tell how long the tentacles were. They used a pole to drag her close and pull her, but the tentacles were completely stuck to her arms, and they couldn't get her on board. Fortunately, they had a long fish-cutting knife and a hatchet which they used to cut the tentacles and free her. She was in shock and spent a couple days in a clinic, but I guess she lived. Well, wasn't a man of war then. Oh snap, this looks like a crazy post. It's actually too long for me to read the top of it. Okay. I've had quite a few scary situations. Nothing crazy, but definitely something that scared me. First was coming home after sitting an anchor and having some beers with my friends. I was late at night, probably 10 p.m. or so, and we were back in the bay surrounded by marsh. So even though I could see town, it was real dark back there. I had the spotlight on to light up the channel markers that didn't have lights, doing around 8 to 10 knots because I don't like running fast at night. She was sitting next to me and went to move to another seat and stretch out. She lost her footing and went over the gunwale. I dropped to neutral immediately, put the spotlight on her, and backed up, killed the engine, and pulled her back in. Seeing nothing but her floating there because the spotlight was the only thing lighting anything up was just so creepy. She was fine, but decided not to move while I was running, and she had a buzz going ever again. Second, I was going fishing with my dad and brothers. I was sitting in the back talking with my aunts and brothers about nothing important when my dad cuts the boat into a sharp turn and I see something floating in the water. I thought it was a body and had the worst feeling of dread come over me. It was the body, but a body of an old sea turtle that looked like a guy doing the dead man's float. Last time I got freaky is more cool than creepy. I was fishing with my uncle, dad, and a buddy about 50 miles offshore for tuna. We spotted some on the surface and jumped on the rail holding the hardtop to get a better look to see where they were heading. They dove down, but it was flat calm. We had whales and turtles around, so I was just checking it out and loved the feeling of being right on the edge of the boat, watching the water go by. I saw something in the water, and when I looked at it, it was a hammerhead just swimming alongside of us. It was fascinating but uneasy feeling that close to a wild shark. I could have jumped in and jumped on his back if I wanted to. I helped a guy on the beach reel in his line night once. He said whatever it was getting close. About 10 feet from ashore, a wave was cresting and a 7-foot hammerhead wriggled out of the foam on the line. You'd never have seen it coming down the wave. The thing has a small mouth, and turns out they don't really care for humans that much, but this crazy mother grabbed it by its tail and drug it backwards into the ocean, staying with it until it swam off. What? This dude grabbed... That's insane. He grabbed a shark. I saw the carcass of a giant squid float up and almost hit my boat. What? Float up? What? I used to cruise sailboat deliveries from the Caribbean to Florida for rich folk who couldn't or didn't want to make the trip themselves. I remember the first delivery like it was yesterday because I don't think I've ever had reality kick in quite like that since. There were 4 of us split the nighttime duties, which basically meant making sure we stayed on course, listen for radio chatter, and watch out for lights from ships. We each took a 2-hour shift while the others slept. My first night was during a new moon, and it was the darkest I ever experienced. Nothing to do but sit there with my thoughts. Thoughts like, if I somehow went overboard, nobody would ever find me. Or, how long could I reasonably float before giving way to the sea and dying in the darkest place I've ever been? 2 hours go by incredibly slowly, without something to stimulate your senses. Oh, come on, the thought of imminent death is pretty stimulating, isn't it? Dolphins playing. They sounded just like someone dropped in the water. And being alone at night in the dark looking at an empty ocean, it's scary. A single overturned rowboat. No one in it when we got to it. Spooky to see such a small vessel in the middle of nowhere. We spent the next watch making up stories for how it ended up empty. Ooh, an epic post by Spring. Not a sailor, but a few years ago, I was on a cruise with my family. My folks had gotten a balcony cabin and I was on it, reading from the lamplight of the room at around 11 at night. The sea at night was by itself a little creepy, but when I turned off the lamp, it was like a writhing black mass under the ship. I haven't told a soul what I saw, but I swear it happened. As I looked up from the book, World War Z, we passed a half-eaten whale. Not like a whale that had been eaten by hordes of shark or something. A whale bitten in half. From research I did later, I think it was a humpback whale. From below the fins, it was just missing the lower half of its body. I rubbed my eyes, it was late after all, and it was still there. Since then I've chalked it up to being tired. I don't want to imagine the alternative of a deep sea creature big enough to bite a whale in two. The sea at night by itself is a little creepy? Truth. I was on a recent cruise. The night ocean gave me the creeps. I arrived on a major SAR scene at night to only see blinking lights of life jackets and the smell of diesel. Creepy as... Jeez, that's crazy. This story was told by my uncle and verified by his crew. He was a fisherman, and according to him, this was one of the scariest moments of his life. They went night fishing, as they normally do in the weekends. Things didn't turn out as everyone expected. The weather in the ocean was calm throughout the night, when suddenly it started to rain very heavily. The boat's engine stopped, and coffins started to surface from the sea. The boat was literally surrounded by floating coffins. After what seemed like an hour, the engine came back to life. The rain stopped and the coffins disappeared. They hastily made their way back to the island. This is paranormal, I guess. And although not common at all, these things happen to people in my country. It's called kandumati elhun. And instead of coffins, they may sometimes see floating corpses or hear cries of children. My dad was one, but then, I don't know now, he monitors ships. Apparently, on January 1st this year, I watched my dad receiving news of dead people floating on freezing water with a burning ship behind them. There was a drone sent ahead to monitor the situation that was able to send the pictures, and that's how my dad gets them. It was creepy and sad. They died on New Year. I don't know if it's creepy per se, but definitely chilling. Got an MOB call on Bay of Biscay. Guy had fallen off a cargo ship, and we happened to be one of the ships within range. 7 ships systematically searching an area of about a square mile. We had young people on board, and we had shifts of 16 lookouts stationed all around, people aloft, etc. All 7 ships searched for the better part of a day. The guy was never found. If you go overboard at sea, and you're not wearing a beacon, survival is practically a statistical fluke. Good to know. So if you go on overboard with no beacon, you should just go under and give Poseidon a big old kiss. Huh. Shit. Well, there was a time where we all called to the bridge by the captain. We were told there was a ship a few miles behind us that had been hijacked, and to be extra vigilant. That was the incident, the Captain Phillips, that movie was based on. Could have been a very different day if they came out earlier. Another incident from the year before. We had the sea boat out to another ship. Fog closed in for its return journey, and we had lost the boat for over an hour. Eventually, it found us, but the priest fell in the water when trying to embark, which gave everyone a good laugh. I was in Nice, France, and we were leaving our dock for a training exercise. I was around my preteens and sailed on incredibly small boats with other people. As we left the dock, I noticed a guy laying on his front, floating freely in the sea. I didn't think much of it since people swam here commonly and it was quite popular. When we finished our sailing experience, we circled back and saw that guy again. I watched him for around 5-ish minutes with my buddies, and this guy didn't move. We thought the guy was dead or knocked out. We told our instructor what happened and went on with our lives. We were not far offshore at the time. A fly fisher on the shore managed to hit my sister in the back and hooked her. A screech at the top of her lungs somehow reached the shore, and the caster saw us waving to stop, get to shore, and get the hook out. She's imprinted forever. Oh, a fly fisher caught him? Her? Damn. Not real creepy, but a fun story. Racing out of Long Island. Sound, dense fog, light wind. A little creepy, just ghosting along, hoping everyone has their AIS on. Every few minutes you hear noises from other boats, just trimming sails and such. You also every so often, a chorus of bells and foghorns. Then this one motherfucker loudly going, honk! I caught a small porpoise recently that had been killed by one of the local seals. Not the cute puppy-looking things, I'm talking about adult male shouldn't go swimming kind. Anyhow, that thing was tore up so bad its skull was hanging out. Pretty creepy to think about since it's not really common knowledge. People think they just eat fish, but those things are nasty. Could tell it was a seal that did it from the bite marks on it. An identical ship with people looking back at us, except they were all wearing cowboy hats. Fairly not so creepy one. Was in the Bering Sea. Just woke up very early in the morning, 4 or 5 a.m., and hear what sounds like styrofoam rubbing on steel, along with water rushing sounds. Being a bit groggy and disoriented, I slowly get out of my bed, not knowing whether there was water on deck, as I couldn't see anything with the lights off. While still dry and confused, I put on clothing and get out of the passageway, still no idea what's going on. I finally make it outside and see we're in a patch of sea ice, and the sounds I heard are chunks of ice sliding down the ship, with water being pushed aside. Once I knew what was going on, it was quite cool and a pretty beautiful experience. I was on a submarine. Not a lot of creepy out at sea because I never dealt with what was out there, too busy keeping the engines running. But the time I was most creeped out was when we were in dry dock for refuel. In port in the middle of the night, there are 3 or 4 people in the engine room, me roving, 2 monitoring the reactor, and every couple hours a supervisor to review our logs. I was the rover, so I gotta walk around and make sure that everything is still off. With the refuel, they tore apart the boards used to monitor the reactor, so they built a temporary station topside, leaving me all by myself. It's weird being all alone in an engine room for a nuclear submarine. I became more aware of any noise and super jumpy whenever my supervisor popped out of nowhere asking for my logs. I'm not a sailor, but once my family and I were just kind of boating around to some of the smaller islands around Florida, only to find a capsized and previously burnt boat and a collection of clothes floating out in the middle of the bay where we were. We never found anything about it, and there was no mention of it in the news or the paper. Alright everybody, thanks for watching. If you want to make these kind of videos, please reach out to us. Go to our YouTube channel, click on the About page, and do a CAPTCHA code so you can get in touch with us. We're making software just like this for YouTubers who want to make content, but feel too intimidated to edit hours and hours of content to just have 20, 30-minute videos. It's a lot of work, and if you're getting new into YouTube, it's intimidating. There's easier ways to get started making content. For example, making content like this, where you can explore the internet and read and react to things and add your own flair to it, and also pick the things that you're reading and reacting to. It's a great way to do it. So if you're interested in making that kind of content, reach out to us, okay? We want to have a Zoom call with you. Go to our About page, get our email, say hello. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao.